Welcome back to the Grand Solar Minimum channel. Today is Monday, July 4th, 2022. Thank you for tuning in once again. This is our space weather report for today. And also, we have some very important climate change news to talk about. But let's dive into right now the space weather. And we are looking at solar wind speeds at 462.8 kilometers per second with a density of 7.21. Now, the sunspot number says 42. And if you look right now, and wow, that's amazing, folks. Look at the coronal hole as it turns toward the western side of the sun. Look how fast it closes up as it's Earth facing. So I'm not sure. NOAA's saying we have a chance for a geomagnetic storm on July 6th. And that is incredible. The speed of how fast that coronal hole closed up. And it's almost as if things are getting ready to fire back up on the sun again. Now, there is a lot of activity, and there are circled sunspots, and we will get to that here in a minute. But for the most part, guys, most of these are very weak. And that is where we are talking about with as far as how strong or how weak this actual minimum maximum is going to be in solar cycle 25. A lot of people think that we're still in the very, very beginning and not even hitting the max period yet because, again, we all thought that we were going to see a maximum somewhere around 2025. Obviously, that is not going to be the case. And I say that because, again, I'm leaving the grid up on this graphic because this is the proof of where we are in this solar cycle. And we have a lot of sunspots that are migrating now towards the equatorial region. We've had sunspots with reverse polarity, which usually is an indication that a minimum is coming or a beginning of a maximum period. I'm sorry, not minimum, but beginning of maximum period. So the reverse polarity of the sunspot was amazing. The angle of that weird sunspot that we had is proof of what Valentina Zarkova was trying to explain with the whole north-south struggles as far as the magnetic fields go. So lots of indication that the sun is acting out weakly. And if you look at all of the activity that is happening on the sun, these are very small sunspots. And again, I'll go over to spaceweather.com and we'll go over and count them. But looking at KP indices, we had a weak magnetic storm earlier in the last 24 hours. It only hit a G1 and a KP of 5. Right now we're sitting at a KP of 3. And that coronal hole that is Earth facing turning away now, I just see it grazing our magnetosphere maybe. It could trigger a couple of 5-point earthquakes, but I mean, again, the rate of that closing up as fast as it did, that's pretty impressive. And an indication that we are probably going to see a period of action from our star here as it's been quiet. I mean, sunspot number of 42. The last time that we reported on space weather, it was the settings were still set on this software here, and it's set 149. Now, if you remember in solar cycle 24, we had the double peak. And the double peak, it wasn't just the double peak that indicated the grand solar minimum is arriving, but the fact that the second peak in solar cycle 24's maximum was higher than the first peak. And that is the key indicator. Now, this is per John Casey from the book Upheaval. If you don't have it, please go get it. Mari probably can share a link in the chat to get the book. But there's a lot of things in this book. I'm rereading it. I started all over again because when I started reading it, this was back in 2018. And now after 6-7 years of experience of observing this stuff and reporting on it, the book makes a lot more sense. And we'll get into that too here in the show as well. But right now, we are seeing action on the sun. We are starting to see things ramp up again, but these are weak sunspots. Now, let's go to grandsolarminimum.com and check out what is coming around the bend, because that is more important right now as well. Let's go ahead and screw this here. All right, good. So, zoom in a little bit. Take a look. As you see, we have some very large active regions on the -120 region, which is about 3 days away from the eastern limb, the larger regions. We have noticed that we get a week's long period of action, and it looks like it's coming right now, and then it dies off for a week. And even the activity that we're going to see here from this region, and again, I want to zoom this in a little bit more and get out the handy dandy arrow. All right, so these are not yet on the earth facing side. Everything behind this, these right here are still behind the earth facing side of the sun. Those look impressive, right? And remember, we've seen this before. They're called plaque. And they're just bright, active regions, but they don't possess the dark cores that are needed to become sunspots. These active regions here are very small. Very small. And right now, this is the sunspot areas that are accounting for the sunspot number of 42. So it looks impressive, but it really isn't that big of a deal, is what I'm saying. These are very small sunspots, and there's some very weird coronal hole action that we're going to see, I also believe, as well. Now, right now, these sunspots appear to be they've got their act together, and they are forming where they should when you're talking about a maximum. I've got tons of stuff I want to go over tonight. And half the show is going to be space weather, and the other half is going to be about this climate situation as well. Still an amazing feature that we have here with the orbital patterns here. The dogs like it too. The party is all on this side, my friends. Wow. So the coronal hole that we saw that just closed up suddenly, there's a reason for that. And when the sun rotates towards the earth, it is rotating towards the stronger part of the magnetic connection, because every body is literally clustered in one area. So the sun's magnetic connection to the planets are very, very strong right now. If somebody was on the opposite side of this, and I'll get my arrow out to indicate where I'm talking about. If Earth was out here right now and got a solar flare, it would be very, very impactful, because this is the no zone, basically. There's barely any kind of magnetic connection. So when the sun is on the far side, this is where all the weaker magnetic connections are. So we can see CMEs and sunspots form easily when the magnetics of the sun are weaker on one side to the other. As it rotates towards the planets, it becomes stronger. Folks, again, I'm definitely a believer in the solar dynamo theory. It's all magnetics, and the sun is connected to each one of our planets in the solar system. So this is significant, and the reason why I'm saying this is because being on this side right now with any CME is good, because our sun is stronger. That means the magnetic connection is stronger, and seeing the corona close up that fast is also encouraging, because again, less coronal holes means less solar wind at high speeds that can cause geomagnetic activity. Also, with that being said, if we are stronger in the magnetosphere and we see an M-class solar flare, we are better protected during a maximum than we are in a minimum. So there is a silver lining for any kind of solar action that happens right now, like as far as CMEs go or magnetic filament releases. The good news is that we are in a good spot to where the magnetosphere is already at its maximum, still weaker, but better protection now than, say, in 2026, 2027, heading into the 2030s. So if we're going to see strong CMEs or strong solar storms, this is where we want to see them when Earth is on this side of the sun in this orbit, along with the rest of the solar system. And also, there's a alignment that we're looking at in 2024, but we'll get to that later. So, a little bit more about the space weather part. If indeed we are in our maximum, I want everyone to pay attention to this. This, to me, is telling. And I'll explain. So I believe that we are beginning the maximum here in solar cycle 25, which is right below the 150 or right on top of the 150. Okay? I believe that it started jacking up right around here, the 100 mark, and then this is the beginning of a peak. And I say this is the beginning because if you look at solar cycle 24, you had a peak, you had some downtime, you still had some action, down, and boop, right at the end of the max, we got busy again, and then we came way down and nothing happened. And so many solar scientists out there have predicted such a weak cycle. Now, notice there are two lines, one going this way and one going straight up. The next couple of months will tell us. I don't think this is possible. I think this is wishful thinking. Because they're not rooting for grand solar minimum. Folks, it's, in 1645, what was the population of the world? And people starved back then. Famine was a huge reason why civilizations have fallen in the past. And a lot of these civilizations that have fallen in the past can be connected to solar activity or lack thereof. So I believe that we are starting our max just like 24, but if you compare the max beginning to where we were in solar cycle 24, that's right. It is lower. And you're saying, well, Jake, it's only 10 years apart. Solar cycles are 11 years. Listen, folks, I'm here to tell you that solar cycles are approximately 9.5 to 12 years. There is no exact number on a solar cycle. In fact, right now, the fact that we are already heading into a max indicates that this is going to be a shorter solar cycle, maybe only 10 years long. And with that being said, we are in for a very long and deep minimum. So I believe this second line right here is correct, which will take us again to where it was predicted. And remember, Zarkova predicted solar cycle 24, 97% accuracy. That's what her prediction was, and it came true. So if solar cycle 25 is predicted to be weaker, and this is the beginning of the max because we've seen quite a bit of lull in action. Again, that's going to increase within the coming days. But these sunspot areas are not as big. So again, I believe this is the start of the max. I believe that we're going to see it go on like this right here. This was what, 4 or 5 years. But I don't think it's going to be 4 or 5 years, folks. Maximum. I think it's possible to be in a minimum by 2024, maybe 2025. But 2024, just because of the planetary alignment that we will be in what is known as the Milankovitch cycle, the fact that we are alive to witness this historic grand solar minimum with satellite data, we are alive to witness this 100,000 year cycle, or it is claimed to be that long, to the point where we are going to watch exactly what happens every 100,000 years. Are you kidding me? So right now, and we've said this since 2017, we are in uncharted territory. It is the cycle of unknown. And we are learning so much so quickly, it's almost impossible to keep up with, honestly. But that's why I'm dedicated in trying to produce as much content and getting more support on Patreon. This is what I want to do every day, folks, because it's become so much happening and so fast. And there's just not enough people out there to communicate what's happening in layman's terms. There's a lot of great resources out there on channels. You've got Adapt 2030. You got Ice Age Farmer, you've got Magnetic News Reversal, you have, I'm probably going to forget a few people, and I apologize, Lee Wilbarger out there at KLW News, many, many, many others. Tony Heller is a great contributor to the topic of global cooling. So, I mean, there are some great minds out there that are trying to piece together a way to inform the public, not only that it's not about being right about climate science. It's not about being right and being wrong. It's about opening people's eyes and saying, listen, we're being fed a bunch of lies and we need to be preparing for what's coming and not trying to transition into a new form of technology for energy when it's not yet proven. And during this time, the sun is going to produce less TSI, which is needed in these solar panels to run the grid. But we are going to see a drop of about 1 square watt per meter. And you're thinking, gee, 1? That's a lot when you're talking about TSI, folks. It doesn't take much. Again, you can't have your cake and eat it too, AGW. You want to say a trace gas of 0.0004 is capable of warming temperatures. So why isn't this little bit of information possible as well? All right, let's move on. I have a lot to show you guys tonight. But the biggest thing, I want to start with, in light of the EPA court ruling, new focus on states' power. The Supreme Court decision on June 30th restricting the authority of the Environmental Protection Agency may mean continued pollution from power plants in states that are not switching to cleaner energy. So Fox News is playing devil's advocate, and this is the problem with the Republican Party. Yes, there will be more pollution if we don't go green. Air pollution is bad. We need to continue to work on technologies like carbon captures and trying to help reduce the emissions that we put in the atmosphere. I agree. So I understand right off the bat, we're going to scrutinize the fossil fuel industry because, look, you can't come out there and just act like that you're totally disconnected from some of the people's concerns, and that is pollution too, not just climate change. Let's read on here. It says here the U.S. Supreme Court limited the power of the federal government to regulate greenhouse gas emissions from existing power plants, but didn't touch the power of the states, which is interesting too. That's putting a renewed focus on efforts across the country to limit reliance on power plants that spew planet-warming emissions into the air. Okay. Again, this is Fox News. Why are they reporting in journal? This is journalism that, to me, is important to speak on, but at the same time, it's like they're still trying to appease the global warming community. And that's the problem. There shouldn't be a man-made global warming community because it's BS. I almost said the bad word, but it's BS. It says here that this ruling makes clear that the actions of governors, state legislators are more important than ever. Thankfully, state authority to curb greenhouse gas emissions have not changed. Democratic Governor Jay Inzal, I don't know that guy's name. He's a Democrat guy. Washington, I should say. And then you have Kathy Hochul of New York and Gavin Newsom of California said in a statement after the state ruling, the three are co-chairs of the U.S. Climate Alliance Group, a group of 24 states committed to climate action. Gee, how convenient is that? 24 states and the other 26 are Republican. That's down the party line, folks. That just shows you right there the ignorance of this argument and the fact that Fox News will say things like, trying to focus on limiting power plants that spew warming emissions into the air. That's not true. That's simply not true. And you guys should be upset with this reporting. Everyone's concerned about the midterm elections and about how the Republicans are going to save us. But they don't address the truth about climate change. They don't understand the science either, and that's not helping. California, New York, and Washington are all known for setting some of the nation's most ambitious climate goals. Three have committed to getting 100% of their electric power from non-carbon sources by 2040 or 2045. Which is it, folks? 2020, 2030, 2035, 2040, 2045, 2055. I mean, these targets are all over the place. And by then, we'll already have cooling in place, and the temperature drop will be significant. And like I said, the globalists and around the world will all say, see, we did it. We reduced the carbon emissions and the planet is cooler. We did it. Now do what we say all the time. Sure, most of us won't be here in the 2050s. Why should you care? I get that. Maybe you got friends that have grandchildren. Maybe you have grandchildren. And their kids are going to thrive as well. And how are they going to thrive when the world is basically in a diabolical plan that's going to make the few elite richer and safe during this difficult challenge that we are going to face here in the near future? If the EPA doesn't have the authority, then that certainly doesn't preempt states from going ahead. And they're talking about doing their own regulations. But the problem is that climate change is a global problem. Mixed states efforts aren't going to be enough to make real progress. All right, so that's enough of that. I will tell you right now, there is a stat that I was not aware of, and I want to share that with you. Yeah, no soft landing either, folks. Whoever's telling you soft landing, I know I used to. It's not going to happen. I'm sorry. Where is it at? Oh, here we go. So, between 2005 and 2020, and that means during the Obama era and the Trump era, the emissions for man had dropped by 22%. 22%, guys. We have dropped emissions. Why is that? Well, during the Trump administration, they had something called natural gas flowing everywhere. It's cheap and it's cleaner to burn. Much cleaner. In fact, in 2017, after Trump initiated this this natural gas exploration, that year alone, we cut just 2.7% in CO2 emissions just from that. So natural gas is the cleanest fossil fuel out there. And when you see this stat of CO2 emissions dropping by 22%. And it's in this article here from the New York Post, folks. I put here, yeah, blame Biden for these crazy gas prices. It says here emissions from 2005 to 2020 have dropped by 22%. And yet, the natural variable of CO2 is most definitely dominant and making these Green New Deal policies economic suicide. But back to the Supreme Court ruling in West Virginia. Yes, there is an update on that. And it went through. And that's why we have all these Democratic people out here speaking on, we're going to be fine. It's going to be okay. We're going to do, the states thing here. But the Supreme Court has ruled that the EPA cannot limit these power plants. Now, this was not a political decision for the Supreme Court. This was a decision based on facts. Based on facts, folks. The Supreme Court does not mess around with YouTube channels and stuff like that. They do the digging themselves, and the research shows that CO2 is not causing climate change. Now, the Supreme Court can't come out and say that right now because they're already wanted. People with pitchforks and torches are ready to come after them now. But when you see a decision like this, and West Virginia is a big coal state, if the Supreme Court is going to rule in favor of West Virginia, then every other fossil fuel producing state is now filing lawsuits, and we have begun this now climate war. So we've got the sex wars, we've got class wars, we've got race wars, and now we have energy wars and climate wars and wars in Ukraine and all that good stuff. Anyhow, the EPA is no longer allowed to interfere. Now, does that mean we should go back to burning coal? No, I'm not saying that. My solutions, my compromise to you people out there who believe in CO2 as a pollutant, my compromise is nuclear, hydro, let's get the dams going again, and natural gas. And we will wean off of oil. I can understand cutting out coal altogether. And I know West Virginia is going to be pissed. I know. It's the cheapest form of, energy, but it also is the most, it does put out more pollutant than other CO2 emissions. Now, if we can find the technology that will capture 75% of this coal carbon, okay, we'll keep it. But I really think the solution is a compromise. Hydro, nuclear, natural gas, and eventually wean off of oil. I know, that doesn't make everybody happy, right? But that is a more fair outlook of how to stay reliable during the grand solar minimum. It's not going to be solar. It's not going to be wind. It's not going to be biomass. It is, folks, they're preparing us for rolling blackouts because right now, certain people are in charge, these elite globalists, and they are putting these pieces in place. And they're preparing you for what's coming. They're telling you right to your face right now, food shortages. They're saying it out loud. You're going to be restricted on your travel. They are going to tax you. That's right, folks. This one's good. Whoops. Bad language in that one. I called Joe a CS. But he is a CS. He can S my C, basically, because I'm sick of it. He's blaming the war in Russia on why gas prices are high. Folks, the war in Russia is impacting Europe Yes, definitely, because Russia has a lot of contracts with European nations for gas, natural gas, fertilizer. So, yes, it is definitely impacting Russia and Europe. But here in the States, it shouldn't matter as far as gas. And the reason why the gas is so high is because the United States has all of a sudden not become energy independent. They have reversed everything that Trump did to make us energy dependent. And I can't find this article, of course. But not only just during the Trump administration, but we were set up to move on in the future unless you get some radical left wing government that wants to reverse this and go this green route. Well, then, yeah, but that's what happened. Biden tells Americans angry about high gas prices, that's the price they'll have to pay as long as it takes to defeat Putin in Ukraine. And I hate to be negative. I haven't been following much on the Ukraine war. I know that Lee Wheelbarger does a great job of covering this, but I see a lot of negative headlines on Ukraine about how dominating the Russian forces are becoming. And then I hear from Neil McCoy that, and by the way, Neil McCoy Ward is a very reliable source. I like his channel, good information. And he's talking about how the general in the UK is discussing getting troops, reservists, and civilians ready to fight the Russians. That could be a decade-long confrontation. And, to the people that say they can't afford the decade-long war, yes, they can. Oil alone will carry it through. Yes, they can, because we did it. We're not dealing with Taiwan or a small country or Turkey. We're dealing with Russia, who has backup from India and China. Money is not an object. Okay, we're pouring in support right now for Ukraine. Money is not, it's fake. This war will go on as war as long as these elitists want to go on with it. So it's sad to see how fast our economy is collapsing. Prices are going up, and we're not even in the grand solar minimum. That's coming in the 2030s. We're going to feel the grand solar minimum hurt in the 2030s. This is just the appetizer, and more than half of this is man-made. Now, I've seen a lot of comments about their crops not growing well. Mari and I were discussing our flowers in our garden. They're either being eaten by beetles or the sun is just damaging them. A lot of folks are saying that. And again, we're at the very beginning stages of a grand solar minimum. This takes so much time. And we're already seeing weak growth around the United States. I got comments all over. Please leave comments about how good your crops look. I want to hear good and bad. What state you're from. How tall are the crops? I want to hear good and bad. I'm not all about gloom and doom. If I can find good news, I'm going to report it. We need it. But yeah, Biden's saying the person that asked the question said, with the thought of $200 barrel a possibility, how long are you going to continue to put the world and Americans in a position to pay for these high energy prices? And his answer to that was, as long as it takes. So this is man-made stuff right here. The skipping meals, conserving water. This is Biden's creation, along with the other 200 countries that are in this elitist pact. The Green New Deal is actually increasing greenhouse emissions. Really? Really? Let's see if we can get this story here. Here's an amazing but true statistic. No thanks. After more than a decade of declining carbon emissions here in the United States in 2021, President Joe Biden's first year in office, emissions rose. Again, I just showed you how things went down 22% with Obama, Bush, Obama, and Trump. We were down 22% from 2005 to 2020. Here's a report saying that emissions rose. In other words, not only have Biden's energy politics been a disaster for our economy and national security as we have become more dependent on Russia and Iran. But they have worked as a global warming solution. But they haven't worked as a global warming solution, I should say. To understand the utter futility of Biden's renewable energy crusade, we must go back about 15 years to the amazing shale revolution, thanks to energy pioneers such as Harold Hamm of Oklahoma, the man who drilled the Bacon Shale in North Dakota, began. These new drilling technologies have vastly expanded America's natural gas production, just talking about that, over the past decade and turned America into the world's leading oil and gas supplier. Now, because clean natural gas production soared and replaced coal, again, a very doable thing, as the number one source of power generation. Not only did Americans get rich off of these bountiful resources, but we also reduced our greenhouse gas emissions. I haven't read this article yet, guys. I'm not BSing you on this. I just had it. I share it. Sometimes I see a headline, I share it because I know it's going to be what we need to see. I'm telling you right now, I did not read this article. Our emissions fell by 22%, like we mentioned earlier, between 2005 and 2020. That was more than the Obama cap and tax plan would have reduced these emissions. Here you see it right here, 17% down. Actual emissions, we far exceeded the goal. Ironically, the 10-year trend of declining carbon dioxide emissions actually ended when Biden took office. The conventional explanation for this is that the economy opened up after COVID-19, emissions rose. People were flying less and driving their cars a lot more. But that is only part of the story. Wow. In 2021, emissions in the U.S. increased mostly because increased coal use, not because of higher economic growth. Why? Because natural gas became expensive. Why? Because of an inadequate supply. Why? Chronic investments in production and pipelines thanks to ESG and climate activists. All truth. We need to add Biden's war on fossil fuels to that mix. Energy Department data confirmed that in 2021, coal use rose in the U.S., natural gas consumption fell, and that was because Biden's Green New Deal agenda made coal more attractive alternative in the terms of cost. Again, natural gas, in my opinion, should be one of the biggest solutions when it comes to generating power. So just by the 1 year of Biden ignoring natural gas as a clean source of energy, it shows you here in the numbers that in 1 year he rose emissions. Not that it matters to climate change, but just so you know, Mr. Green New Deal himself, because of his actions, have actually driven CO2 emissions by man up. Yeah. So renewable energy still stay way below. Nuclear is solid. It should be higher. Natural gas is going up and down. Prices are high. Again, natural gas is the future. With all the land that we have, all the federal land we have here in the United States, there's no reason why that we can't find ways to burn cleaner energy and get rid of coal. Switch to natural gas, switch to nuclear, switch to hydro. See how much money we save. Tons of money. Because the amount of money it will take to maintain solar panels and windmills. Think about that. Who's replacing the panels? Who's taking the panels to a special yard that only panels go to because the minerals are bad for the environment? So if they go into a regular landfill and these minerals are absorbed by the soil, in time, it could create problems. So green sounds more toxic than fossil. You burn fossil fuels up and it dissipates into the atmosphere. Yes, it does interact with the sky. It does interact with our atmosphere. It also interacts with cloud nucleation, but does it rise the temperatures? And the answer is no. Why? General, basic thermodynamics. CO2 rise is after temperature rise. And in 2016, let's go to Dr. Roy Spencer here real quick. Since 2016, we have seen a drop in temperatures. This is not fake. I don't care if it's satellite data or NASA's data. Here's our peak. Here's a second attempt at a peak, but it didn't go as high as the first one. Each time the temperature rise comes back up, it's lower than where we peaked at in 2016. And it's a coincidence that CO2 is rising continuously, but temperatures are dropping. If you look at this right here, temperatures are dropping and CO2 is still rising, 421 parts per million, by the way. And we're sitting at 0.06 degrees above baseline. And this is why we're switching to green energy. Meanwhile, we're having energy crisis and wars and prices are too high and people are losing their power. Get out of here. Look at the decline in temperature and how fast. You know who predicted this plateau right here? Joe Bastardi. Joe Bastardi called this in 2017. He predicted this. Now, he said he wasn't sure where it was heading afterwards, but he can concentrate on the 5 years ahead. He was right. But like everybody else, this is an unknown territory. And right now, the trends are very attractive for a continuing trend of cooling. We are at the beginning. Again, temperatures rise, then temperature rise, or then CO2 rise follows. And since 2016, we have dropped from 0.73 to 0.06 above baseline. The parts per million of CO2 in 2016 was somewhere around 398 parts per million. That was during the peak of the temperatures. Today, we are sitting at 421 parts per million, and there's where our temperatures are. You notice how the arrow dropped. It didn't go up. The arrow fell. But the CO2 rise is still happening. So, again, I'm trying to understand where AGW is trying to make us believe that CO2 rise is causing temperature rise when it's actually the other way around. And right now, our data is reflecting that from 2016 to the present. It's time to wake up, folks. It's time to wake up. I hate to be unpatriotic. I was at a 4th of July celebration, and they had people standing up for the Ukraine war. Played their national anthem. Everybody stood, hands on their heart. Guys, this is part of the distraction. I hate to say it. Don't be fooled. We are sending them billions of dollars of our tax money. Billions. Hundreds of billions have been spent already just in Ukraine alone, and not one soldier has put a boot on the ground. These countries are supporting Ukraine financially and weapons, but no one's fighting the Russians. Why? What? Doesn't anyone find that weird? We all know that U.S. could just step right in right now and just end this right now. We all know that. But they're not doing it. It's like there's a deal. There's a backdoor deal going on here. And Putin, yeah, let's blame him, but we'll give you all the oil in the European nations in return. And that's where Putin's going to make his money to keep his war chest open. Because that's what's happening. Iran, Russia, Syria, China, they're all forming alliances. They want to change the monetary system of how you pay for oil, which will go to rubles. And where do you get those? That's right, Russia. So I don't mean to get real deep about this, but this is important stuff, guys. Victory for the cooling community from the Supreme Court. They're looking at the facts. They are also saying that temperatures are decreasing since 2016. That's a good span to start with, all right? Lower solar activity has also happened during 2016 till present. That's a fair correlation to make as well. So again, this is not going to be overnight. This is going to take a lot of time. Folks, keep following this. And we are going to see here in a few months where we are as far as a maximum. Was this just a faux spike in activity? Are we really heading for a record solar cycle? I don't see it. I still see a very weak sun with the solar wind speeds and KP indices low and G1 storms, the lack thereof of them. We had some M-class flares and a couple of low X-class flares that were really just strong M-class flares. I mean, folks, maybe we're not in the maximum, but if we are in the maximum, this is incredibly weak. All right, I want to say hello to a few folks out there in the chat. Good to see some of you guys returning from the crop report. Hello there to Knife Collector, very enthusiastic gardener, Wood Spirit, and my dogs, of course. Also, DKTK, thank you for returning as well. You were at the first broadcast. Pizza, also a returning Per Stramberg. Hello, sir. We talked to Per a long time ago. Check out our interview with him. Very, very insightful. He has also a website. Mari, what's the name of that website? Per Stramberg's. I'm sorry, it's on our website. We have it in the resources department. Let's go look at it. But very good information from Per Stramberg. I'll go ahead and pull that up, actually. We've got a lot, I'll tell you too, I've been thinking a lot about reaching out to some of our old interviews and talk to them again, especially people like David Dilley. I'd really like to speak with him because he had a lot of interesting things to say about the moon. His research and work also includes lunar cycles that contribute to this climate that we're seeing right now as well. And a lot of the stuff, if you go back and listen to these old interviews, it's really interesting to see how right some of these people were. And right, Ralph Nietzsche, very interesting conversation with him. I'm trying to get there, guys. Hang on a second. Resources. Somehow I got to global warming. If it's not here, I do apologize. Anyway, he has a great website. I promise I'll put it in the section. I thought for sure I had it on my website where there was like resources. I know Mari and we're talking about switching things up, trying to get things going again on the website, and it's still a work in progress, but I thought they were right here. Okay. Well, I will find it, but thank you, Per, for being a part of the chat today and watching the episode. Also, want to say hello to Daniel. Good to have you in the chat. Lots of familiar faces and lots of new people as well. Vert Kiver, good to have you here. Matthew Bros, Patricia Clayton, glad to have you aboard. Cat Nova attended the doubleheader today. All right, folks, that's going to do it for us today. Shirley Davis, good to have you as well. I saw you there. I wanted to get you in there. But that's going to do it for this afternoon's report on the state of space weather and where we are with climate debate and how things are slowly starting to show that we are going to be, it's going to be a little bit harder for the globalist to fight this fake climate change war that they have going on. Bear with me, folks. When you have governments like here in the United States, and when you have protections with the Supreme Court limiting the government's authority of regulating energy and whatnot, it's telling. This is a big celebration for this community. I think everybody needs to recognize that no matter what our differences are on politics or whatever, we can all be thankful that we're starting to see some logic. I'm not talking about the Roe v. Wade. I'm talking about the climate stuff. And I'm happy to see that the Supreme Court ruled that they're overreaching And this is going to help future states to win lawsuits as well from EPA limiting. And this is going to help bring down energy prices, folks. Natural gas is clean. Nuclear is clean. Hydro is clean. What? I've given my solutions. I hope somebody's listening. If you guys like what you've seen so far today, please check out our Patreon membership levels. I'm really just shooting everybody, just throwing a buck. We have over 33,000 subscribers. If I had 1,800 of you just participating at a buck, that's gravy. But the goal is to raise that money to keep that support coming in. And what we want to do is produce content like we have today, a crop report, space weather, and some climate news. And then this evening, I'll also have an evening report as well. Going to talk about more economics of what we're looking at with this Green New Deal and WEF and what their role is in that as well. So again, if you guys like what you see and want to support us and help us keep going here, check out our Patreon channel and select any membership level. But again, we start as low as a buck, and you can't beat that. What is that? Like a cent a day or something like that? I don't know, something stupid. All right, that's going to do it for me tonight. Thank you, or this afternoon, I should say. Thank you for tuning in. And everyone stay safe out there. We will talk soon. Take care.